And if you apply this in let's say, a local market, you're just going to dominate the search.
I would
You're
think
going to
so, yeah.
you're going to just crush it. He's done like $5 million worth of business off that blog, and you can search for metal tank painters in Oregon, and you will see it ranking right up on top. I'm telling you, anybody can do it,
Yeah.
but you just need to know the different things that you're just not aware of.
Edward Winslow, I have heard your name for so many years, and it's so great to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to come on. Proof stacking. Today, when we're done with this, Edward, I think you're going to have taught people how to grow their business. Not just real estate business, but I think any small business too, right? Or actually any business.
Unbelievable. I could tell you so many amazing stories.
We're going to hear them today. I'm looking forward to it. I probably should give a little bit of your background though first. How about I do that? Edward Winslow is a marketing strategist who developed proof stacking, which is something there's some bigwigs in the commercial real estate industry that live and breathe this. Proof stacking is a data-driven approach that uses case studies to turn past success into future business. He also had time to write a little book that you're going to want to get. You don't happen to have a copy there, do you? There you go. What exactly is proof stacking? Let's start there.
Well, let me go back a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, and let me give you a little bit of my background and tell you
Sure.
a couple little, some key things that inspired me along the way. So, number one, I'm from CBR. I started my career many, many years ago at CBRE. Now, at the time, it was Coldwell Banker Commercial. When they did the split, it became CB, and I was there for a year when I got out of college. So I started out in an office in New Jersey. I was working for some leasing brokers. I wanted to be in the sales business. Um, but when I first started, the first 15 minutes when I walked in the door, the manager of the office came in. He was going to start the training program. And he said to me, he said, we're the largest and most successful real estate company in the world for one reason. He said, we have a system. He said, if you follow the system, you will succeed. If you deviate, if you think have a better way, you cut corners, you're going to fail. And I never forgot that. And so what I did was when they asked me what I wanted to do, I wanted to be more in the investment sales business. And they said, well, we don't have anybody here to help you, but you might want to there's a guy in New York City. His name is Bob Knackle. And he said, you might want to give Bob a call. So I called Bob. He had been in the business for about 4 years, and he had had success selling small to mid-sized properties, which was great. And so I called Bob. I went in to see him on a Saturday, and I started going in on Saturdays to work with him, and I would help him out with his maps and his messaging and his newsletters and everything like that. And that's where I started. So I got really into that. And then when he started his firm, I went to work with him. And what we did back then, we were real estate brokers selling buildings, primarily the Upper East Side, and we focused on small markets. And the whole concept was to become the expert in that market, know everything, every brick in the space. And so, early 90s was pretty tough to make money back then. The markets were pretty lean, and I ended up selling a property and walking back from the sale after the closing with a commission check in my pocket, pretty jazzed about that. And but I was like, well, I need to sell more of these. Like, how am I going to get my next deal? And so what I did was I went back to the office and I sat down with a plain white piece of paper and I just started jotting down the key points about the property, and not so much the brokery type stuff, how much was the sale price, how big was the building, what was the per square foot, but I told about where it was, what was the history, who was nearby. And I was just jotting down these key points, and I looked at these points, and I'm like, then I started to organize them and I put it together. I'm like, okay, here's a little story. This is sort of interesting. And what I did was I just sort of filled in the blanks, and I had the secretary type it up. I put in an 8 by 11 envelope with a photo of the property, and I sent it into the New York Times. And the New York Times, about 2 months later, published it on the front page of the Sunday real estate section. So I had a quarter page visibility. That was the beginning of Proofstack. Now we didn't know what to call it back then. We didn't have a name for it, and we certainly didn't have a name like case studies. We just wrote articles. We were content marketers. And what we did was we used proof to build our business, because it was, we were in a very, very competitive market. A lot of competing brokers. So how do you compete? Well, the way we competed was with market information, like really insightful stuff. Like we really dug into our market, like sort of came up with different angles, and we would put together market reports, newsletters, and we would, in the beginning, we didn't have many things to talk about. So we would just put together market information. We would send it out direct mail. We would call owners of the properties in our area. And that's how we built our expertise. Now, as we sold properties, we would follow the same model. But, we always use bullet points, right? Like when you're a real estate broker, you're always using, flyers, setup sheets, whatever you want to call them. And we're using bullet points for all the key things. And what we did was we embellished that content with we would take the bullet points and we would sort of embellish it, like add a little bit more detail to make it a little bit more, storyful. But we didn't know what storytelling was back then. We just was like, we're just trying to make money in a competitive market.
Right.
And it started to work. And the formula worked. And, Bob and Paul Massey, they continued to build the firm. Now I went out and I was with Bob for about 12 years, and I went and started my own firm. I was doing some brokerage up in Connecticut where I live, and I was, buying properties. And, and then sort of, I just kept doing the same thing because I knew what worked. And I found that the same thing worked up here in Connecticut that worked in New York. Then I bought a property, and it was a 12-unit building that I converted into condos, and I had a website built for that. And I didn't know how to get ranking on search engines at the time. So I figured, well, if I took a keyword phrase that somebody might search, sort of like, well, affordable condos near the train station in Stamford, Connecticut, like things like that. And that worked. I started to get the rankings on the search engines back then. Yeah. And that's how I sold all those units. And it just kept evolving. And the issue was I just didn't know how, or I knew this worked, but I just didn't, it always gnawed on me that I didn't know why it worked. And so proof stacking came from, just my, searching, being inquisitive, like trying to explain to people who were, people were reaching out to me saying, hey, can you help me online?
Sure.
And I was like, and they're like, well, explain to me what you do. And I'm like, well, I can't really explain it. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what copywriting was. So I didn't know how, I really didn't understand how I never even heard of copywriting. And copywriting is, it's the process of using words like they use in infomercials, direct response marketing, things like that. And I got involved with some really, really awesome copywriters. I'm here in Wilton, Connecticut. There happens to be one of the world's greatest copywriters, like in Westport, Connecticut, which is a couple miles away from me. And I got into a mastermind with him, and I started to learn about copywriting. And that's when I was like, okay, well, why does this work? And what I figured out from all this studying and understanding storytelling and that you need characters and things like that, it's like, well, why do these case studies work so well? From an SEO perspective, because I was applying this before social media. And the question was, why is this producing at such a great level? And I've seen it over the years. I see all these SEO marketers, saying things. I see these marketers online, like jumping up and down. Oh, I got my client a $25,000, project. And I'm like, so what? One of my clients just got $100 million piece of real estate to sell. I don't even want to say that to people because that's the kind of stuff that can happen.
Right.
And so the question was, well, why does this work, right? And so what I did was I learned about characters. And so, like, there was a book that I read by Steve Pressfield, and there was a really great quote in the book, and he said something to the effect like, you know, there's an evil force that is causing naught to all our dreams. We have to name that force, accept it as our enemy, and figure out what to do with it. When I read that quote, I was like, well, what is the evil force? Okay, what is the evil force that is preventing us from succeeding? So I know proof creates trust, but why? What is that? What does it overcome? And what it does is it overcomes consumer doubt. And then I started to think, okay, well, if there was a character, what would we call a character that we need to overcome the consumer doubt, right? And so it's like, well, let's call him the doubter. So then I started to dig into it even further. Like, okay, my kids, when they were little, used to watch the Polar Express, which was a Christmas movie, and the kid was called the doubter. So I went back and I watched the movie like 10 times to try and understand the character. And what I found was that the story was that this kid who was the doubter would see proof after proof after proof after proof, and he still didn't believe it. And that's the same story. Like if you watch Moses and the Ten Commandments, that's the same story. It's sort of the story of life.
Yeah.
And so when you start to understand who that person is on the other side, we all know, ourselves. We're trying to promote something. We're trying to sell something. So we're thinking about ourselves. But when you turn it around and say, okay, who is my customer? What's going on in their head? What's going to move them along so that I can do business? And how can I use this mechanism, these market information and case studies to move that person along? And so when I started to look at it from that perspective, I really started to understand markets so much better.
Sure.
Like I understood why we did what we did. I understood why it started to work. And then, it was, that's when we came up with one-page case studies and proof stacking. And that's sort of how it happened.
It's brilliant. Understanding your consumer is really the key, right? And then build it from there.
It's the key to everything. It's the key to everything. And if you look at Bob, like Bob Knackel, great example. He's when Bob and I reconnected about 2 years ago because he heard about what I was doing, and I just introduced this name, and he's like, well, what is proof stacking? What's one-page case studies? I said, Bob, it's what you've been doing, for all these years. You've just been stacking the proof, and and one of the things so I said to him at the time, I said, how are you today? Like, are you doing anything differently than when I was working with you? And he said, well, not really. He said, there's a couple things he said that we have found. And he said, back when you and I were working together in the early days, we were working on markets with like 400 or 500 owners. And he said that number one, we were dealing with, where the territories that we were working in, there were a lot of user type buildings, like end user buildings, family offices and things like that. And he said a lot of those owners only owned one building. And so if you've got a market of 400 or 500 buildings and the annual turnover rate is 3% or less, well, you're dealing with a very, very small pool. And these owners, these people that own the buildings, they only sell the buildings on average every 40 years. So he said, you can really figure out, now that we understand the metrics better, we know we have a better idea when somebody's going to sell a property and how frequently we need to stay in touch with them. And so he said, what we did was we modified the strategy to go more after like multifamily properties where an individual owner might own on average 5 properties. Some might own 30, some might own 1. And he said, so we found that if we stayed in touch with 1,000 owners, the pool of properties might be like 5,000. So if your annual turnover rate is like 3%, it's like, what's that? I don't know, 150 buildings a year, 135, 150 buildings a year. And, and the goal is to try and get a percentage of those pieces of property. And so the whole model, so now we're really, really tightly, that's what Bob's, saying to me. He's like, now we're really tightly focused on a very specific market. Like we really understand the market, we really understand the consumer. And now that I've got a name for this thing called one-page case studies and proof stacking, he's like, okay, now I know the mechanism. Now I know how to even be more efficient because we never had a name for it. And so he said, now that we've got this mechanism, we know how to use it more effectively as a tool. And that's, that's sort of the market side of it. So
And
it
it's pretty
really
simple, right? It's really the ingredients are market data, being able to story tell, and then your call to action at the end, right?
that's it. And we don't even with the case, the one-page case studies, we don't get into the problem solution.
Okay.
We're not going
Okay.
because from an SEO perspective, one of the things that we do is like, okay, so we've got our headline. We want our headline to be a headline that Google is going to understand what that page is about. We want to have the relevant keywords, geographic terms, maybe an address, maybe a neighborhood, maybe a type of property. You want your introductory paragraph or two. Then we utilize bullet points. Okay. And really what we're doing is we're just presenting the facts. We're not trying to really persuade per se. We're just letting the consumer sell themselves, right? So that's sort of the concept, right? So we'll use bullet points, and then like when we get into let's say like location, for example. You can say something like this is very interesting. Location is a really, really big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a really big deal online. And it's something that I never really thought about until I started to explain this to people. But location is so key. Like if you think about movies, like every movie is about, somebody's chasing somebody else, right?
Yeah.
They're searching for something, but it's whether it's a love story or it's a thriller, it's all like, they're moving around, they're going all these places. Location is such a key thing. So, I'll use an example for like let's say the World Trade Center in New York, for example. So you could call it One World Trade Center. So let's say you sold One World Trade Center. You can have the address One World Trade Center, but what we've gotten into is what are called picture words. What we're trying to do is we're trying to utilize words that help the consumer understand the story. These are called picture words that create a mental image in somebody's mind. So if I was to say One World Trade Center, okay, it is One World Trade Center, New York City. But if you say One World Trade Center, which is one block from the West Side Highway, it's 3 blocks from Wall Street, it's 5 blocks south of Tribeca, it's right near the 123 subway that takes you up to the Upper West Side, and it's near the PATH train that will take you over to over to New Jersey. All of a sudden, you're just by adding a little bit, you're creating a story about the location, so that when the consumer reads that, they're getting some really nice context. Mm-hmm. So you're separate, very, very simple, but you're doing something a little bit different than everybody else, and you're helping tell your story. So when we get into bullet points, that is one of the concepts that we want to utilize. We want to utilize understanding what are picture words. Picture words are, it's like I'll use an example. Once upon a time, there was an ogre named Shrek who lived in a swamp, right? I mean, you've got 4 different pieces of picture words, with words that connect them all together, and now you can see something. The beauty of doing something like this is it makes you so much more memorable. It just makes people On the Google side, it has a big impact.
I can imagine it
Um,
creates more dialogue too, right? Because it's people are going to be more apt to reach out to you, I think.
it's leverage. It's
Yeah,
leverage. You're telling stories. Then, if you look at every broker in the country, and I don't care what business it is, whether you're in, construction or you're a personal lawyer, personal injury attorney or whatever, you can embellish your content. Now, Google eats this up because they know that this is really good information. So if you take a particular keyword and you put like a little description on either side of it, they're just going to love that content because Google is looking for the best content to serve up to their consumer. But when you're utilizing this strategy, headline, introduction, bullet points with decent descriptions, maybe some frequently asked questions that support the content. You throw a Google map in there, you put a picture, you just created a one-page story. And the beauty of that is that when you start to do that over and over and over, not your individual stories are like episodes of, they're like Netflix episodes in a way.
yeah.
And what you're doing is by putting them all together and continuing to do this, what you're doing is you're just stacking the proof and you're telling a story. And if you apply this in let's say a local market, you're just going to dominate the search.
I would
You're
think
going to
so. Yeah.
you're going to just crush it. And I will tell you that it's really interesting. I have a guy. I worked with a lot of contractors. I just get referrals. People call me and say, "Hey, can you help me?"
Yeah,
People
sure.
so and so. I have a guy that I've been working with for over 10 years, 12 years. Happens to be out in Oregon. Um, and we wrote a little case study for him. Sort of long story short, we ended up writing this blog post called Metal Tank. The headline was like Metal Tank Painters in Oregon. And it was all about this story about this fuel tank at a lumber yard for a commercial, as a commercial project. He's done like $5 million worth of business off that blog. And you can search for Metal Tank Painters in Oregon, and you will see it ranking right up on top. And he sent me a lead yesterday. He just got a lead from a company that has a 100-foot tall silo, and they needed all the piping was all, get rid of the rust corrosion, and
Sure.
they needed railings painted and things like that. And they saw that he had painted it, like 3 different case studies came up under that search term. When he got the lead, the consumer used the words that were in his post and said, that is what we're looking for. He was done deal, resold. And that's what this does. And so what I did, even still today, I'm just fascinated with the kind of results. And I've done it for, I have a client that I'm doing this for who's worth a couple $1 billion. He's a real estate guy. We've done it for him. We're doing it for him and, managing his online reputation. And it's had a huge impact on him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it, I don't care whether it's you're the local painting contractor or you're worth $1 billion. The same model applies, but it goes back to what you and I were talking about in the very beginning. It starts with your market.
Yeah.
You've got to get your strategy set right. But once you've got it right, once you've got your messaging clear, you can repeat. You're basically saying the same thing over and over. And you can take one of the things that is also extremely effective. And I've seen this in real estate and I've seen it in construction. When you take these case studies and you print them out and you hand them to a prospect, there's nothing to say.
I
They
can
just,
imagine. How does let's say you've got a new agent. Obviously, they don't have that many stories, but this is something that can really put them in the forefront of a lot of their competitors. What do you
absolutely.
suggest a new agent does?
Okay, let's use Nina as an example.
Okay. Which, by
Perfect.
the way, we need to say thank you, Nina Steiner. She's the one that connected us.
Yeah,
She's a commercial real estate agent here in Los Angeles. She's amazing.
she's awesome. So Nina, what I said to Nina was when I started working with her, I said, Nina, what do you do? Okay, well, I'm an office tenant rep broker in LA. And I'm like, too big. Let's bring it down. Well, okay, okay, let's focus on this. I'm like, how many towns is that? And she's like 20 towns. I'm like, too big. Let's break it down. Let's get it down we finally got it down to 6 towns. And so what we did was we built out a website for her and we broke it down into like Santa Monica, Culver City, Brentwood, Playa Vista, Marina del Rey. I think it was El Segundo, maybe. Mm-hmm. And what we did was we went and we did a little research and found how many buildings were in each town, what was the average price per square foot, or what are the different kinds of properties, A, B, and C. And then what we did was we laid it out. And and the model was, we don't just help you find space, we help you find the right space at the right price. And as soon as you scroll down, you look at it and say, oh my gosh, there's 354 buildings in this area. There's Class A, there's Class B, there's Class C. I don't know which one. So what we did was we built that strategy out, and I said, okay, let's start implementing a social media strategy. And I said, let's focus on the individual buildings. I said, forget about success stories. Let's just focus on your market expertise. And so let's start implementing a strategy where you're talking about every single building in your market on social media. We have a little format. It's like the one-page case study down in miniature. And what's happening is she keeps doing it and implementing it over and over. And we're using AI. We came up with a little like formula, and we're utilizing things like, whatever the address is, and here are 3 restaurants nearby. Here's the type of food there is, and here's the address. Here are 3 hotels nearby, and here's, the park nearby, and here's the train, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's very short, and she's getting so much engagement. And what's happening is that people are starting to recognize her as an expert in this area. We're not talking success stories. We're just talking market information. And when you look at it, it's like, man, you really start to identify with her. You see exactly what she does. She's blowing the doors off anybody else, that nobody else is doing this. Yeah. And what's happening is she's been doing this for a couple months, and now she's starting to see it, like, in the beginning it was like crickets. And she's, it feels like nobody's looking at her content.
Right. I see it all the time. It's very good.
Her content is excellent. So for somebody that's just getting started, this is a brilliant way to do it. But it's really based on, where we started this conversation when I started working with Bob Knackel. Mm-hmm. We knew every single building in our territory. And so what we've done is we've taken that model, which incidentally Bob built and sold his business for $100 million, back on that model. We've applied that online. And so what we're doing with Bob and his team, yes, he's got a lot of success stories, but he's also got a lot of market information. Yeah. It's not just about success stories, it's about market information. There's 2 parts of it. The one-page case study is market information and success stories. If you don't have the success stories, you can go market information. Now, if you're just getting started, you can post about little one-page case studies about a property that's sold in your market. It doesn't mean that you sold it. It just sold. So that's sort of like a case study of a sale versus market information.
Sure.
But what you're doing is you're just giving information. And what that does is it eliminates the need for trying to sell.
How often do you suggest people put this content out? Every week, twice a week?
The more you can do it, the better.
Okay.
It's just it's not going to replace the phone. It's not going to replace one-on-one meetings.
Yeah.
But the more you can do it, the better. I've got a guy in New York City, a guy named Mitch Waldman I work with. One of the strategies we came up with, Mitch, he's a tenant rep broker, and he works by himself. He's got his own firm. And, one of the strategies was, Mitch, trying to rank for office space in New York City is going to be too hard. And I don't even think that's where the conversion comes from. I don't think that's where the clients are coming from. That might be somebody's first search, but it's not going to be their last search. We want to go after that last search. And so I said, let's go after individual buildings. Let's create content about individual buildings. And more specifically, let's talk about the cost. And so the strategy became office space cost at such and such building. And so what I did was I said, make an appointment with your blog every Friday morning at 9 o'clock, write one a week. And that's what he did. And so he did one a week for many, many years. He ranks for the office space. If you do a search for office space costs at the World Trade Center, you're going to see him ranking number one. And, that World Empire State Building, Chrysler Building, Penn Plaza. I mean, you can go building by building. And so it's the same strategy that, we worked on with Nina. And Mitch is really not talking so much about success stories as he's talking about market information. When people do a search and they land on these individual buildings and they see that he's got information on all these buildings, that does the pre-selling right there, because they see him as the expert.
Absolutely.
He's created the proof. He's created the trust. When he gets a phone call, on the scale of, 0 being the weakest and, 10 being the highest. When he gets a phone call, people are coming in at a 7 and an 8. There's already something to talk about. It's not an icy cold experience. It's a warm experience, because they've got something that, we've utilized this mechanism to bring people together. And it's been amazing for him. So he's been doing one a week. So hopefully that answers that question.
One thing I was thinking is you're looking for that last call, right? But by doing this, you're removing skepticism.
Yes.
You're working on your reputation and your brand, all three in one.
Yes.
Very powerful. I don't know that there's any other. I mean, because cold calling, you got somebody answers, they're like, who is this? When they're reading this, when you're proof stacking, they've got the evidence right there. This is who you are and what you've done.
Cold calling is really, when you really think about it, it's a very self-serving. It's very self-serving, because when you're calling somebody cold, that all they're looking for is a commission.
Yeah.
They're looking to make money off you.
That's it.
And I get those kind of calls all day long from all kinds of different businesses. And it's like, show me what you've done.
Yeah.
Because if you can show me what you've done, then we got something to talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't, if I'm getting cold calls, how do I know who you are? I don't know if you're the right person for me.
Right.
I don't know anything about you. But when you utilize proof, it's just such a powerful way to get business. And I see people talking online about, cold calling. I make 100 calls a day, whatever it is. And I'm like, I haven't made a cold call in 20 years.
Yeah.
And, people come to me because they already know who I am and they already trust me.
Yeah.
And at least when I get them, I'm getting them I'm getting them pretty high in the scale.
Well, the inbound leads are going to be high. The thing is, there has to be a combination of outbound and inbound, and this should really increase your inbound leads. And they should be more solid.
Yeah, absolutely.
So opportunity to make more money, generate more revenue. It's there. You've given them the prescription. How many agents do you think, I mean, again, Bob talked about it at Commercial Real Estate Influencer Summit, which, by the way, anybody listening, September, you can ping me and I'll send you the information. It's a great way to meet a bunch of top-notch commercial real estate agents. But how many commercial real estate agents, or actually real estate agents in general, or small businesses, are using this system? I can imagine because it's so hard to get people to adapt and evolve for something like this. I would think the ones that are doing it are knocking it out of the park. How many agents or how many of these people are actually doing it?
Not many yet. I do have a group that I teach. I've got a few hundred marketing agencies that I work with. So it is being I only really started bringing this to the market and teaching people this
Yeah.
about 2 years ago. And so, I've been since working trying to bring it to the market to bring the awareness. But I have people in my group in all kinds of businesses that I have a guy that is in my group. He is a marketer. He's got 100 tree, I don't know what they call them, guys that cut down trees and limbs and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And he's completely shifted that business because what he was doing was he was creating your typical SEO content that would rank, but not really convert.
Right.
And then he started to implement the case study model, and all of a sudden it worked out beautifully. He was helping his tree guys convert the case studies into physical handouts. So when they went to meet with a prospect, rather than closing 2 out of every 10, all of a sudden they're closing 7 or 8 out of every 10, and all they're doing is handing, so I would say that the market is very, very untapped.
Yeah, I would think so.
I'm hoping that I can change that.
Well, we're going to put the links down below so people can connect with you. We're also going to put a link to your book. I'm going to put it up on the Joe Kellinger website. And so people are be able to go in to learn, and they're going to find your book there. It'll be at the top. And because I think this is so important for our industry, actually any business should be doing this. And,
It's so easy.
Yeah.
It's so
It's the
easy.
storytelling I think that's daunting to a lot of people. They think they're not good. And my concern is people are just going to go into Chat GPT or Perplexity and pop it in there, and they're going to put that out. That's not going to work well for you. It's got to come from you as an individual as your actual experience, and you'll get
what the formula that I've created has taken the need for a lot of expertise out of it.
Right.
You just need to know how to do it.
Right.
And anybody, I'm telling you, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
But you just need to know the different things that you're just not aware of.
Yeah.
Like I know that, like in the industry, the challenge, what is the challenge, action, results, testimonial thing? That is very popular in the industry, but I don't go that way. Number one, that's too hard. I created this to make it simple and fast. That was the main thing. Like, how can we get multiple results out of this? And how can we create it fast without having to study SEO and all that kind of thing? And so there's a formula to it. And I've almost got it broken down into templates. Now, on the, I do fulfillment for companies. We have clients that we do this for. We do SEO and that kind of thing. But I have people that are implementing this model that don't know anything, but they just follow it. And it's like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Everything about this, it removes the need for technology. It removes the need for storytelling. You naturally, just by filling in the blanks, you start to become a storyteller. You start to see and understand niche markets. Like the metal tank painting guy.
Yeah.
I love telling that story because this guy, when I started with him, he was referred to me by somebody, and he was painting houses. Now he's getting 100-foot tall silos. He's doing all these amazing commercial projects, but it's all niche based because people they care about themselves. They're thinking about, okay, imagine somebody's doing a search for a metal tank paint.
Yeah.
That's sort of bizarre, but that's how people search online. It's not the only way that we would have ever opened up that market. No keyword tools on the planet would ever have opened up that market. It only came from doing case studies, these little one-page success stories. That's it. That's where it comes from.
I know it works. And, Bob Knackel, Nina Steiner are prime examples that it does work. And so, Ed, what's next for you?
Well, what I'm doing is, so I have the book. I have a little training program, which is very expensive. It's like $200, $150, something like that. And then I have a mastermind. So what I do is like, most people, I'm like, buy the book. If if you're serious, take the course, go through it. It's 3 hours. Now you understand how to do it. Well, you want to join the mastermind. I have a mastermind. It's like $47 a month. You jump in and we have live calls like this. And people can come in and see, the model. And there's a lot of different little things that you can embellish the model. But that's really the main part of my business is, on the training side, it's very inexpensive because it's very simple and it's very, very specialized. So anybody that wants to join that program is, I'm going to tell you, I'm not like I'm trying to sell anything, but I am telling you that if you do it and you just stick with it over and over and over and just repeat, 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 repeat. If you go look at bkrea.com, which is Bob's site, go look at the success stories.
Yeah.
Same thing over and over and over. If you look at his market reports, we're doing the same thing over and over. And it's just a wonderful system. The beauty of watching Bob is that I've never seen anybody who's been able to do the same thing every day for 40 years without deviating.
And he does it 7 days a week.
I don't know how he does it without the getting bored and deviating and chasing another shiny object, thinking there must be an easier way. He doesn't. There's something in his brain. There's some like little coach sitting inside his brain that knew this from the day he started.
It's worked well for him. If you send me the links to your classes and your mastermind, I'm going to post that down below in the video. Okay. So people can go directly to it because I think it's worth the investment. It's really, I know you don't want to sell, but I'm happy to, because I think it's worth everybody's career. We need good people in our industry, and this can help them grow and make a lot more money. So thank you for doing that, Ed. And
yeah, I'll tell you, it applies to every market.
Yeah.
I mean, there's thousands of opportunities out there, thousands of niche markets all over the country.
Yeah. Ed, I put out yesterday, I was going to be interviewing today, and obviously I said, do you have any questions you want me to ask Edward? And obviously we have a lot of mutual friends because almost all of them but one I can't even repeat online. But Chad Griffith asked, how do you handle a negative review?
You mean like a negative Google review?
I guess, yeah.
Well, I mean, you can go on and you can reply to negative reviews.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Just
don't just let it sit.
There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, the best thing to do is address it. Now, to avoid a potential problem like that, if you really want to be proactive, every time you get a review, respond to it.
Yeah.
Because that way, if you do in fact get one that's negative, you've sort of diluted it because you're not just responding to the negative ones, you're responding to the positive ones, and you're creating a dialogue. Now what you're doing by responding is you're turning it into you're creating your own little case study.
Yeah.
In a way, you're creating your own story. So I would say that, the best way to do that is to respond to the positive reviews so that when you do get that negative review, it's diluted.
Yeah. I think it's important to respond. You can learn a lot from it. Those negative reviews. I mean, even on YouTube here, I'll get a negative comment once in a while. I mean, some of them are real, some of them are not, but, I've learned from those. Somebody should, stop interrupting, stop, you're like, okay, at first it kind of stings, but keeping it open and listening to people can really be helpful. But Edward, well, thank you very much for coming on today. This was so educational. Now I've got some ideas I need to go change. So I'll be doing that. But how do we get in touch with you?
Everywhere. Okay. So you
I've
can
seen,
find me. Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn, Facebook, email is, my email is ejw@creteventures.com, which is, I've had that email forever. It's CRETE Ventures. I'm pretty easy to find on social media. Like I'm always on my phone. I'm always available.
Okay.
And if I'm not, I usually am back to you pretty quick. So you can find me on Facebook chat. You can find me on LinkedIn chat.
Okay.
You can reach out to, I have a website called onepagecasestudies.com. You can find me there.
Well, and also if anybody wants to put a comment for Ed down below, I'll make sure that he sees it, and that way he can respond to it as well. But Edward, thank you very much for today. I appreciate you taking the time. And for those of you watching, if you could, please give us a like, and if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.